Ray traced GI added into GTA 5 definitely massively enhances the visuals when just looking at outdoor scenes in the sun, and combined with other enhancements found on PC like massively increased draw distance for the game's ray tracing structure, it is pretty easy to see how the PC version offers up a big improvement over the consoles should your PC hardware suffice. The game looks a lot better on PC, and the RT update here is surprisingly comprehensive. In fact, it is so comprehensive that on closer examination, you can see how incredibly complex it is with a lot of features and care that went into its development. So much care that I cannot imagine that would be the effort spent for an effect which only works on one platform in one game. This is where I come to the second station in this video, as I postulate that I think the ray-traced global illumination in GTA 5 is in fact a version of the tech originally developed for GTA 6 in mind, which has now been backported to an older version of their technology for this game. That means with GTA 5 on PC, we're actually getting a preview of the lighting and technology in GTA 6, both in terms of features we can expect for that game, and even potentially what it means for performance in that game. Let me ground my reasoning here with a number of points. Often when a game gets ray tracing that is limited to a select platform, typically developers will make that ray tracing more limited. Like in Dying Light 2, RTGI only works for the sun and not for other lights. Or in The Witcher 3's current gen update, RTGI there does not work on a per pixel basis, and instead it coarsely applies to the world with probes and has artifacts as a result. With GTA 5's RTGI, it is not such a limited thing. It is a much more comprehensive beast. For one, it applies to any and all light sources, so you can see it applying to stationary lights like we see in this alleyway here, where without RTGI, all the shadowed regions outside of the direct lighting of the street lamp are that darkish gray blue that I talked about earlier. With the RT suite on, we can see how there is a direct bounce of yellow-orange light from the street below, cast up onto the side of the building. This is not just limited to stationary lights. Even moving lights, like those on cars, have RTGI applied to them. Like we can see here without RT, me shining my high beams at this wall here keeps them strangely dark in spite of that lighting. With RT on, we can see tons of bounce light from the car headlamps, brightening up the scene and even causing indirect shadows behind the pillar. Getting bounce lighting from any random light in the world and having that bounce lighting be coherent and stable is not actually that easy and requires a lot of work, yet Rockstar put in that effort here. Another strong bit of evidence that I want to point out is how the RTGI in GTA 5 here is per pixel. So you can see very fine detailed shadowing and light bouncing that cheaper and easier to integrate probe systems might not have. All those fine indirect shadows I mentioned earlier, like from the crossbeams, show that off well. Small objects occluding or bouncing light. On an even smaller scale, you can even see the effect of bounce lighting on character models. Like with this woman here, sunlight hitting the light blue coat is bouncing it onto the underside of her face. This per pixel nature of the RTGI in GTA 5 is something we see exactly in the GTA 6 trailer, specifically in this shot here with Lucia. The sunlight hitting her prison jumpsuit bounces light onto the bed nearby and even on the underside of her face, like I just showed off in GTA 5. Another detail with the RTGI in GTA 5, which I think points to it being technology from GTA 6, comes from the fact that it also works incredibly well with emissive materials. Emissive materials are those surfaces in games which are supposed to give off light. In rasterization, like we can see here, these signs in the parking garage are emissive textures, so they glow. But with rasterization, it's hard to impossible to actually capture that. So in this case, an artist has placed a point light right in front of each of these light textures. There's a white point light in front of the left texture and a red point light in front of the right texture. Both are just circular point lights with a hard cutoff, awkward fall off, and are non-shadow casting. So they look strangely detached and video gamey. Flip on RTGI and you can see how the emissive surfaces of the signs now are treated as full-on area lights. So you get much more detail and nuance in their lighting. The whiter part of the sign changes the color of the light nearby it, and there's no more awkward fall off, and you actually get shadows coming from these lights. The cool thing about this emissive lighting is that it applies to any surface that is tagged as emissive, with startling effects, like outside that same garage. Without RT on, you can see that these oddly shaped colored light surfaces on the outside are tagged with emissive textures. The problem is, of course, that they do not give off any light of their own, as rasterization cannot do that, and they look like they're awkwardly floating over the dark facade. With ray tracing flipped on, we can see how each of these shaped emissive light sources colors the areas nearby, dramatically changing the scene. Having stable emissive lights work as a feature of RTGI from arbitrary shapes like we see here is not at all easy to implement. Yet here we have GTA 5 where it applies to the entire city. It even applies to those awkward low-res window textures I pointed out earlier. They cast emissive lighting onto the area nearby at night with RTGI. This attribute of the RTGI is actually once again echoed in the GTA 6 trailer in the shots in the club there, where the pink emissive light under the stage casts soft light onto the people nearby, and the people even cast shadows from that light. So in sum, the RTGI in GTA 5 is very robust and contains many features that would have required a lot of effort. So much effort that I have a hard time imagining them putting in the work for something which would only service one old title on one platform. On top of this, the RTGI is not just haphazardly put together, requiring a massive GPU. In fact, it is really optimized on the GPU side and has some clever optimizations. An example of those optimizations is found in the alpha cutout textures used for trees and vegetation. In reflections, you can see them accurately represented with individual blades and other details. That makes sense for quality reasons, but when tracing diffuse GI, that is a needlessly expensive effect, actually, most of the time, for an effect which is visually soft and diffuse. So Rockstar here have cleverly made it so that alpha cutout textures, like those from vegetation, never test transparency, which saves a lot of performance. The only downside is that you can sometimes occasionally find a situation like this, where the plant looks organic with rounded and small detail, but the indirect shadows from that plant look blocky as you are seeing the quads which comprise it being affected by the lighting. It's a small concession, I would say, in light of how performant the GI is on GPUs. An RTX 4060 at 1440p DLSS 3 quality mode and using the Ultra RTGI setting and Ultra RT reflections and otherwise maxed out runs the game at a flawless 60 FPS even while blazing through the city at high speed through denser traffic. The game really does not need optimized settings on the GPU side of things, as the RTGI and other RT effects are not exactly heavy on GPUs. That is great actually and bodes well for GTA 6 on consoles, as the trailer for that game showed off both RTGI and RT reflection technology. The only catch is that the ray tracing is not nearly as fast on the CPU side. An RTX 4060 can get a perfect 60 FPS with RTGI and RT reflections on Ultra, only with the caveat that is paired with a bigger CPU, like the Ryzen 7 9800X3D here. With a more console-like CPU, such as the Ryzen 5 3600, it is a very different story. There, running around the game world at speed incurs frame rates being CPU limited, often below 60 FPS, spending much of the time in the 50s or even sometimes a little lower, with frame times being more erratic, making motion less smooth on a VRR display. Additionally, there are occasional one-off frame time spikes that present as hitches, being above 30 milliseconds. So while RTGI is relatively light on the GPU, it is far heavier on the CPU side and is much more limiting as a result. People with low-end CPUs who are playing this game ought to introduce frame rate caps to 40 FPS or so to make things more visually smooth when ray tracing is on. Regarding GTA 6, this is also an interesting data point. If a console-level CPU like the Ryzen 5 3600 cannot manage 60 FPS with ray tracing on a game that is 12 years old, how exactly could it manage 60 FPS with a world that is a magnitude more dense with ray tracing in GTA 6? The answer is that it is not very likely to be the case, and it is probably a good reason as to why GTA 6's trailer was 30 FPS. Perhaps to set expectations, but I think expectations can be suitably set just by looking at how GTA 5 performs here on a lower end CPU with RT on. It's not so great for 60 FPS.